Hi everybody, and welcome to a super exciting Scotch and Coffee tutorial on how to create an evolution of a map video. I'm Archie, one of the lead designers on the core, and this is probably the most requested question I've received personally since starting work on the core, so hopefully I can put some of these questions to rest in this video. Got to give a big shout out to ModDB, where this tutorial will be posted. Put my my trailer for the core up here. Overnight, 75,000 views. Like I can't even comprehend that number. It's you can probably tell I'm not very good at maths. It's not that big a number, but in terms of views, I mean, just blown away by the reaction to that, and just thank you so much, everybody. Your comments are genuinely so uplifting. It's amazing. If you're interested, by the way, in a behind the scenes of the trailer itself, do let us know. Post in the comments, and I'll see about getting something together for that. So anyway, let's storm on ahead and have a look at what we're going to make. So if you haven't seen an evolution of a map video, they look something like this. Okay, so let's all pretend it's not incredibly obvious that I only spent a day on that. Okay, so let's open up our map editor. I'm using Sledge here, this isn't Hammer. Holy crap, how cool is Sledge? If you haven't checked it out, go to twahl.info and take a look at this thing, because it is very, very cool. Just the fact that it exists is pretty goddamn fantastic. It's basically a modernized, revamped version of Hammer, and it's only in pre-alpha and it's already just fucking great. I can't really hide my enthusiasm about this. It's really cool. So, right, the first thing you need to do is have a pretty good idea of what your map is going to end up looking like, or what the area that you're wanting to record in is going to look like. Because even at this very, very first stage, so I have, you know, 10 or so walls here, and a floor and a ceiling, and that's it. And I already have to know pretty much where I'm going with this map, because it's at this stage we have to put in our cameras. And that is because we are using virtual cameras. I'm not just flying around with the mouse in game or anything like that, because it would just be impossible to match up my movements and timings correctly. So the first thing you're wanting to do is create this little entity here, which is a trigger camera. You don't need any special FGD file, it comes with pretty much every single gold source and source game. So let's start with what you need to make a trigger camera work, aside from the entity itself, which is pretty obvious. First thing you need to set up is a series of path corners for it to follow. This entity here is just path_corner. Give it a name, so I've gone for camera 1 P1, cam 1 path 1 basically. And next stop target, cam 1 P2. Makes perfect sense. Don't even need to go over this stuff. You know all this. I tend to set my hold time pretty high for these evolution videos. Around a minute is probably good. If it's lasting longer than that, your video is too long, and you need to calm down, sort that shit out. And 50 is a pretty good starting speed. You can adjust that when you compile and have a look at what it looks like. So first thing, camera entity, and then your path corners. Now I've got 3 in this particular setup. The camera is going to start at this one here, move to this one, and then finish at this last one here around the corner. Now to just explain a little bit about what a camera is going to be doing, if I just let it go as it is currently, it would either follow the orientation set by the path corner, or it would continue, depending on the option you chose, it would continue just facing the direction that you assigned it at the very start. So it would look something like that, keep facing that wall. Or I could try and do adjustments with my path corners, but that's going to end up looking pretty jarring and not all that great. So what I need it to do is, as well as tracking forward, I need it to pan. And I'm just going to show you an example of this in the last evolution video I did, which was SenLab 2. And you can see as the camera's moving forward, it's also panning to the right. So as it comes around the corner, the camera's actually looking around the corner. And the way that I did this is I had a train set up, just an invisible train here, and it has these two other path corners, so you're going to be getting used to the path corner entity. I use it for everything. And I've got a path corner up here, and basically it's very linear. That train is just going to start there and it's going to move up here. Now the train has a name. It is called Cam1TT. So I've camera 1 target train is my thought process behind that. And here we have an info target called Cam1T, which is just camera 1 target. Now it's set to move with this train. So what's going to happen is when the train entity moves along its path, the info target will as well. And then back in the camera, we have its target set to that info target, which means the camera itself is going to pan and tilt in order to keep facing this. This will always be its 0 position, right in the middle of the screen. Essentially where your crosshairs would be if you were pointing a gun. They're always going to stay on that if your camera entity has a target field like that. So now what's going to happen is, as it's following along this path, it will start looking over here, and then when it crosses this path here, I've got fire on pass camera 1 target train. So when it gets to this point, it'll still be looking over here, and then that train will start moving, and as the camera comes around here, it'll continue panning and tilting up to here. So you get a nice sort of quite cinematic sweep over it. And that is how you achieve that. Okay, so now that you've got your basic camera and target system set up, you need a couple more things before we actually get going. The first is a button. This is going to be what actually triggers your camera and starts everything going. You want to put this in a place where no player can reach without no clipping, just so that it's out the way. And you also want an ambient generic here and a multi-manager. So the ambient generic is going to play this little sound. It's buttons/blip2.wav. You can use pretty much any sound you want, but you want it to be a nice sharp beep, and this is one of the best ones that comes with Half-Life. Set it to start silent, not looked, and play everywhere, and give it some nice loud volume. I've named mine Sync. And here we have our multi-manager, and with Smart Edit off, I've set it to target sync after 5 seconds and cam 1, which is our camera, after 6 seconds. So it's going to play the sound and then it is going to start the camera, and I will show you why the sound is very, very important later on. So at this stage you're ready to compile, and you might not normally compile a map in this extremely early stage. I wouldn't either, but unfortunately if you're going to be making an evolution of a map video, you're going to be compiling a whole lot, and there just isn't any way around that, unfortunately. Okay, so you've compiled your map, and load it up in the usual manner. There we are, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, it is a masterpiece. Absolute masterpiece. So you'll notice the little frame rate counter in the top right. That is because I am using a program called Fraps as my screen recorder. There are many screen recorders out there, but Fraps is like $25 and it has never served me wrong. I would recommend it wholeheartedly. You'll notice that the frame rate is a little juddery actually, and aside from the fact that I'm doing a screen recording of a screen recording, that is because the compile was not a full compile because I didn't run RAD, because there's no lights, and a lot of the vis calculations are actually now performed in RAD in modern compile tools. So at this stage, before you add lights, the frame rate might be a little bit choppy even in a super basic map like this. Now, if you were doing a standard recording using a camera, you would be using a constant frame rate, be it 25 or 50 or 60, or if you're in America and don't like easy round numbers and just want to fuck with the system, you can use 29.97. Why not? You know, if it makes you happy, you can pretend that NTSC is a real thing. The rest of the world is gonna not do that. Anyway, but unfortunately in games it is a variable frame rate, and that can actually get very annoying. And you'll notice in some of the evolution videos that I've done, you start seeing noticeable changes in the camera position, even though it's the exact same camera following the exact same path. Those very slight frame drops can actually push the position of the camera right out, and it is a pain in the butt. Now there's a couple of things you can do to minimize this. The first is to go into options and make sure that VSync is enabled, and what that's going to do is sync the game with your monitor's refresh rate. So in this case it's 60 frames a second, it will sync with that. And then also if you bring up Fraps, or whatever screen recorder you're using, and make sure that it is also targeting 60 frames a second or whatever your refresh rate is. And that just sort of unifies it across everything, and you're going to get the most accurate recording. So what you want to do is press the button and immediately start recording. And the reason you do it straight away is because when it first writes the file, there's a little bit of a frame rate jump, and you want to minimize that. There's our beep, and now the camera is going to start moving. And this is the first check of this move. Might be worth doing this without recording the first time, but I've got a hunch that I'm going to stick with this one. So there we go. You can see the train has started moving, so the camera starts panning right and tilting up until we end up in this end position, and I think that went pretty well, so I'm happy with that. I'm going to stop recording. I'm going to quit out my game, and there we go. I am happy with that move. I think that worked out pretty well, so I'm not going to adjust anything. It's important to note, however, that if you weren't happy with your camera move, you have to adjust it now. It can't be changed later on in the process. You're going to waste hundreds of compiles if you change your camera halfway through, so make sure you're happy with it now. So once you're happy with your camera and you've recorded your first sequence of following the camera through, you can actually start mapping, which I know you'll be excited about because you've had to sit and watch this incredibly boring bare room, which is no fun whatsoever, so you can actually get started on the good stuff. So there we go, that's a brush. And now you're going to compile again. And I know what you're thinking, you're like, but what, you added one brush? I know, and you're going to have to get used to that as well. You're going to be compiling after very minute changes, and if you don't, unfortunately the effect of the video is somewhat lost. You want each change to be quite minute, quite discrete, so that it starts building over time rather than huge big sudden changes every so often. Conveniently, with the power of editing, actually no, let's just say I'm a fucking brilliant mapper. If you blink, just close your eyes just for a wee second, and okay, I finished the map. Brilliant. So yeah, every single addition to this, whether it was adding the railing or, you know, adding a strut, every single addition there was a compile between it. And I know what you're thinking, it sounds like a lot of work, and it is a bit of a pain in the ass, but actually I think it's beneficial in the long run, because the more you compile, the more... I left that face nulled. This is the final version. I never did any further versions of this, so that's actually in the video. What an idiot. What an idiot. Anyway, yeah, I've completely lost my train of thought. I just got blown away by how shockingly lazy mapping that was. So, yes, the more you examine the area in-game with each compile, and believe me, there's going to be a lot of compiles, it is actually beneficial in the long run, because you start noticing things you wouldn't normally, like the camera pans over like this, and I went, oh, that ceiling's not very detailed, I better put some stuff there, so I added the strip above the lights and the vents. Okay, so once you've run through your map, how many times did I actually do that? Okay, so I only compiled 16 times over the process of this map. I would expect you're going to be spending a lot more time. This was just, you know, half a day's work. So what I'm going to do is bring all that footage into my editing software. So I've brought in all my footage, you can see it here. And the first thing we need to do is sync it. So this is what the beep was for, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Each clip you should have started recording just after you press the button, so each one should have a beep in it. You can hear it there. So there we go. And what that does is provide an incredibly effective way, and is used in real life, of syncing all your clips. So I'm using Adobe's Premiere. It doesn't really matter what editing software you're using. If you're feeling more comfortable with your editing, you might be using this, or perhaps Avid. If you're just starting out, a good one to try would be Sony Vegas if you're interested in editing, or if you're not interested in editing, you could consider Final Cut because it's not interested in editing either. So what I'm going to do is, with my first clip, I'm going to go frame by frame until I hear the beep. There we go. And I'm going to set that as my in point by pressing I. It's been a while since I've used Sony Vegas, but I don't believe it actually uses an in-out editing system, which is a bit weird, but what you would do is just bring your whole clip down onto the timeline and just do exactly the same thing, except on the timeline you just sort of scrub through it until you find your beep and cut at that point, which I think is the S tool in Vegas. I think it's split clip. So you set your in point and you take it down onto the timeline. So it'll start at the beep, at the very first frame of the beep as well. It's important to be very frame specific here. You can't, you know, leave you guessing either side or it just won't sync up. So there's the full camera move on this first clip. And that's fine from the beep. You know, you're going to take your second clip, do exactly the same thing. So there's the beep. I'm going to go at the start of it. Frame perfect, remember. Wait until I hear the beep. There it is. I'm going to set that as my endpoint, and I'm going to bring that down on top of the first one. And then I can just go forward maybe 2 seconds, say. It doesn't really matter, you don't have to be specific at this point. But you'll notice on my program window up here, you'll notice that it is perfectly in sync. So the transition is happening, you can see up here, this top trim. You can see that is happening at the exact same time in the camera move, and that is because the beep, I know for a fact, is consistently 5 seconds after I press that button. So, and the camera move starts consistently 1 second after that beep. That is the only thing you can absolutely count on the Gold Source engine being consistent about. Its multi-manager timings are spot on. Do not try to sync off the camera move itself because, like I mentioned earlier, frame skips and stuff will not make it a viable option. So I'm going to go to my third clip, do exactly the same thing, bring that down. Remember, it's all the way back to the start because they're all synced off the beep, which is the start. You're not bringing it down to here. I'm just going to drag that in as well, and that'll be 3 in a row synced, so you can see that wall extrudes. Might be quite subtle in the video since there's no lighting. That wall extrudes out, and again, it's perfectly in sync. And you're going to do that for every single clip. So here's another one. I'm going to bring that forward. There we go. That's the lights in. And again, it's staying in sync because of this beep. So every single one, you're setting your in point at the beep, and you're dragging it down. And you don't have to keep them all separate. You can, you know, actually commit your cuts onto the one track. By the way, if you are using Premiere or Avid, you can do this as a multicam, which you'll see here. It's a very quick way of showing you that it is all in fact in sync. But these multicam interfaces were designed with, you know, 4 to 8 cameras in mind, and when you start getting 35, it can get pretty sluggish on your machine. I've got a very, very fast graphics card, and it would struggle to play all of those at once. So I don't recommend multicam for this, just if you're wondering why I'm not using that and you know about it. Okay, so once you've got your entire timeline set up and sunk, it should look a little something like this. So that's full video all the way through, and I did that exactly the way I just showed you. I just dragged them out one by one, set their endpoint, and put them on the timeline. You want to sync them to music at this stage. So choose your track. I've gone for one of the rockier numbers from Half-Life Episode 2. And what you want to do is use the rolling edit tool and start listening out for the beat, and just adjust your cuts in accordance with the beat. And this is a very important part because it really tends to sell the transition effect when it's to the beat. And I tend to do it after I've sung everything. You could have done it in the first stage, but I like to have everything on the timeline and just use rolling edit to make precise changes. I mean, you could even like minus 15, that'll go 15 frames back exactly, or plus 12. You know, you want to be nice and precise, and in a lot of editing software you can actually go frame by frame and just listen out for the big hits. So there's one, so you can hear that, and that would be where I put my line, my cut. Then once you've got everything sunk, or synced I suppose, you can choose how you're going to be transitioning between the shots. So far I've just been doing a pretty standard cross dissolve. It's pretty subtle, and I tend to keep it quite quick as well. Okay, so here is what it looks like when it's finished. I had a long moment in the middle here where not much was happening on screen because it was all happening over at this end of the map, but timing wise I wanted to keep this in, so I did a quick edit of the audio and put in a less bass heavy section just to try and travel with that. But that is it. It is literally just a matter of recording the same camera move over and over and over again. You can do multiple cameras in one area. It tends to be a good way of selling the full environment. But despite it being a lot of effort, I really do think it's one of the best ways to demonstrate your map. And even not so much to show you guys, I actually find this hugely beneficial for me, because like I said earlier, I start really over-analysing and being very, very critical about areas I normally wouldn't be. And it's an excellent way to sort of map your progress over time. It's also worth noting, actually, that game footage is some of the best possible for 3D tracking. It tends to be a smooth, consistent movement that the tracker won't have any trouble with, which means you can start adding in cool effects and titling, which will interact with your in-game camera, which is really nice. It just kind of tends to sell an effect really, really well. But yeah, that is pretty much it. Like I said, thank you very much for watching the core trailer and watching the core itself. In fact, if you haven't, if you go on ModDB, we certainly do appreciate watchers. You can hit a button that says start tracking this mod, and we really, really do appreciate that. Leave comments, let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, and if you want to see a behind the scenes of the trailer itself, let me know, because I'd be more than happy to tell you about the thought process and the technical information about what went into that. Thanks for watching, can't wait to see what you guys come up with. Let me know if you use this technique, I'd love to see your videos, and cheers, see you next time.